I have a question for you. What is the most dangerous combination in politics? Inflation and elections. It's a nightmare for any politician. Here in India, the government is facing that deadly combination, inflation and elections. Inflation is at a 15-month high. Food prices are up by double digits, and multiple elections are around the corner. So how is the government responding? By controlling exports. Onion is the latest commodity. India has imposed a 40% export duty on onions. 40%. How does that help? The export duty makes Indian onion more expensive abroad, and more expensive equals less demand. So the idea is to discourage the export of onions, to retail more supply in the Indian market, and hopefully to stabilize prices. Speaking of which, onion prices have risen by 20% from July to August. Chances are they will rise further. The current rate is around 30 rupees per kilogram. Experts say it will double by September, maybe even reach 70 rupees per kilogram. The question is why? Unlike cereals, onion is not affected by the war in Ukraine. So why are prices rising? You can blame climate change and erratic weather for that. India has 3 onion seasons. The season from April to June dominates supply. Around 65% of India's output comes from that season, April to June. Now, this supply is supposed to last until September. By then, the next round of harvest begins. It's usually a smooth transition, but this year it was not so smooth. Onions harvested during the summer are rotting faster. The unseasonal rains have affected their shelf life. So come September, there could be a crunch, hence the export duty. On paper, the duty is supposed to last until the 31st of December this year, but a lot depends on how things play out. If the price rise continues, the government may consider bigger steps, like banning onion exports altogether. It was last done in 2020. But if the prices cool down, the duty could be removed. And traders will be hoping for that. Most of them are protesting the export duty. In fact, trade has been indefinitely halted at Asia's largest onion market, which is located in Nashik, in Maharashtra. The question is, how quickly can prices be cooled? Let's look at what happened with tomatoes. 2 weeks back, the price was 260 rupees per kilogram, and now it's under 100 rupees. So things are looking better. Not ideal, but definitely better. The government is also selling subsidized tomatoes from vans and public shops. Those cost just 40 rupees per kilo. The plan is to do the same with onions. Government shops and vans will be selling onion for 25 rupees per kg. The buffer stock is also being increased. It was 3 million tons earlier. Now it will be increased to 5 million tons. So fingers crossed the price will come down. But at what cost? India is the largest exporter of onions in the world. In the first half of 2023, trade was up 63%. Dozens of countries buy onions from us, like Bangladesh, Nepal, Malaysia, the UAE, and Sri Lanka. How will they respond to this move? And the onion move is not an isolated one. First, India banned the export of wheat, then non-basmati white rice. Now, higher export duty on onions, and reports say sugar could be next. There is talk of banning the export or setting quotas. Now, such sudden decisions will affect credibility. They will leave importers in a limbo. And that is one problem. The second problem is that of climate change. Let's face it, our weather is more erratic than ever. But are the farmers prepared for it? Has the government prepared them for it? Tomato prices were up because of weather, and now onion prices are up because of the same reason. We need to find solutions for this. When you have 1.4 billion people to feed, you can't afford volatility. You need an assured supply. Maybe onions will jolt the government to action. They're not as important in our diet as rice or potato, but onions are politically savvy. You hear inflation and you think about 2 things, fuel and onions. In fact, India's 1980 general election was called the onion election. Tells you how important they are. The current government also realizes this, which is why the export duty has been announced in the first place. But will it be enough to plug the supply issues? Guess we'll have to wait and watch. From Trump, let's turn to his biggest nemesis, the Wuhan virus. It's mutated so many times since 2020, and each time there is renewed interest. We hear more predictions and precautions. Tonight, we're focusing on one of them, Booster shots. Should you keep taking booster shots or not? The White House certainly thinks so. President Joe Biden is expected to release a statement soon. He will ask Americans to get booster shots. Well, what number are we on? Depends on your age and health condition. Biden, for example, has got 5 shots. Chances are he will get his 6th one before this winter. But why is the US suddenly talking about boosters again? Because of a new variant. It's called Pyrola. The strain has been detected in Israel, Denmark, the US and the UK. The World Health Organization is monitoring it. Based on their findings, they will designate the variant, whether it's a variant of interest or a variant of concern. But right now, it's too early to say. Doctors believe it has a significant number of mutations. Theoretically, that could help the variant evade vaccines. But Pyrola or not, cases are rising. The US reported 10,000 hospital admissions in the first week of August. That was 14% more than the week before. Pharma companies are confident that their shots are updated. Moderna released some data last week. They said their booster can defend against Eris and Fornax variants. Eris and Fornax, again, these are strains of the Wuhan virus. Eris has led to an increase in hospitalizations in the UK and Europe. But are boosters the answer to all of this? Let's look at a couple of factors. Number one, more than 5.6 billion people have received the Wuhan virus vaccine. That's around 72% of the world population. So much of the world is immunized. Factor number two, the mortality rate. Despite occasional spikes in cases, the deaths have not increased. India, for example, reported just 1 death in the last 24 hours. My point is simple. This is not 2020. We do need vaccines, but our strategy needs to change. The World Health Organization released some guidelines in March this year. They divided people into 3 groups: high priority, medium priority, and low priority. The high priority group includes older adults and people with comorbidities. These people need a 4th shot. They need it 6 or 12 months after the 3rd one. And don't mistake this for annual boosters. The WHO specifically warned against it. Listen to this. The additional booster recommendation should not be seen as for continued annual COVID-19 vaccine boosters. The aim is to serve countries planning for the near to mid-term. Now to the medium priority groups. These are people below 50 without comorbidities. The World Health Organization suggested 3 shots for them. So the primary series plus 1 booster. And finally, the low priority group, children aged 6 months to 17 years. For this group, the WHO has left the decision to governments. They said 3 shots are fine, but take a call based on your health situation. Like how much are you spending on it? Is it affecting other vaccination programs like measles or polio? Basically, don't make it mandatory. So the WHO guidelines cover up to 4 shots, but some countries are talking about triple boosters. How is that? Well, one reason is that they can afford it. The second reason is that the scientific community is divided. The US is talking about making Wuhan virus shots annual, like your flu vaccine. But some within the US FDA are not convinced. They say the flu is seasonal, but the Wuhan virus may or may not be. So the need for annual shots has to be proven. It has not been proven yet. We need a solid reason to keep taking shots, and that reason cannot be why not. Because pharma companies will keep investing in vaccines, they will keep updating them. Just look at what happened last week. Health companies dragged the entire US market down, but 3 firms bucked the trend. Pfizer shares were up 3%. Why? Because their booster showed some good progress. Moderna and Novavax also did well. Again, why? Because US hospital admissions hit 10,000. Do you see the problem here? We can't let pharma companies dictate the need for boosters. We have doctors for that. We have governments for that. There are vulnerable, aged people who genuinely need boosters. These people should keep taking them. The rest should follow scientific advice. Look at the opportunity cost. Look at the public health impact. Then you can decide on boosters. If your doctors tell you, don't think twice. Get yourself another shot. Otherwise, keep yourself informed. The WHO and other agencies have released enough information on jabs. Go to their website, read and understand. Now let me tell you about a heist engulfed in irony. Our next story is about the British Museum. It's a grand institution, also a shining symbol of wide-ranging thefts. In fact, it is the world's biggest receiver of stolen property. But its motto seems to be, first you loot, then you lose. We say this because the world's greatest thief is now being looted. Let me explain how. From the 16th to the 20th century, the British went on a colonization spree. They ravaged nation after nation and stole their culture. They looted close to 8 million artifacts. The list included India's Kohinoor diamond, Nigeria's bronze plaques, and decapitated dried Maori heads. All of this is displayed at the British Museum. They've been urged to return what they stole. Of course, they haven't, and they don't plan to. Instead, they ticket the world proudly to let them view the loot. They make money off it. The British Museum has locked up the legacy of other lands, and poorly so. Recently, a staff member was accused of stealing from it. The lost items included gold jewelry and gems dating from the 15th to the 19th century. Now, the suspected worker has been fired. An investigation is underway, but this is not a unique instance. In 2004, 15 pieces of Chinese jewelry were stolen from the museum. In 2002, a 2,500-year-old Greek marble head was taken. Also, this is not unique to the British Museum. Artifact thefts are very common, apparently. Last year, thieves stole 500 ancient gold coins from a German museum. In 2019, jewels worth $108 million were stolen from another German museum. Despite security, museums suffer robberies. Experts say this happens nearly every day across the world. According to the latest Art Loss Register, 700,000 antiques and collectibles are currently lost or stolen, 7 lakh pieces. But here's what's shocking. Such thefts happening in institutions as large as the British Museum, they hold monumental objects. They chronicle entire civilizations and help us understand them. Like the Rosetta Stone, it enabled researchers to understand ancient Egypt. It was part of the British loot. It now sits inside a glass case. Artifacts like these are worth hundreds of millions of dollars, so the museum cannot afford to be caught off guard because we know what comes next. Most of the stolen items are sold in the black market or even melted down. In 2005, it happened to a Henry Moore sculpture. It was worth about $4 million, but it was melted down and sold for less than $2,000. It's criminal. But that's not even the worst part. These museums hold the world's history hostage. They contain what is not theirs, and they fail to protect it. Countries like Greece, India, Ethiopia, Nigeria, and Ghana say these artifacts are theirs. They should be returned, and they're right. But do you know the museum's response? They say these countries lack the infrastructure to protect such expensive historic items. By the looks of it, the British Museum is not doing a great job either. In fact, it reeks of entitlement. It has withheld stolen spoils and makes up excuses to keep them. But wait till you hear the second excuse. The museum refuses to agree that most of its keep is stolen. The argument is, stealing is not really stealing if you're taking something that's lying around. Finders keepers. Such interesting logic. Do they also eat other people's lunch left unguarded in the office fridge? Their defense holds no water. The crimes committed by British colonizers are undeniable. They stole from the whole world, and now a large part of that cultural heritage lies unprotected in their museum. It's unacceptable. For decades, England has gotten away with it and raked in tourism revenue. The museum's trustees are comfortable and in no mood to return what's not theirs. But what about their government? Experts say most disputed artifacts will have to be returned if the government really chooses to. The US, Germany, Belgium, France, they're all doing it. They're returning the loot. But England remains bullheaded. Britain cannot right historical wrongs, but it must stop profiting from them and not make excuses for theft. Speaking of politics, the US is gearing up for a presidential election next year, and Donald Trump is hoping to make a comeback. He's ahead in the polls, at least in his party, but the former president is still feeling insecure, it seems, so he's going back to some old tactics, like complaining about taxes in India. Donald Trump is talking about Harley-Davidsons again. You know, the American bikes? India taxes them. And it's been one of the pet peeves of Donald Trump. So as he hits the campaign trail, he's making fresh threats. Trump says he wants retribution. If they are charging us, we will charge them. Those are his words. They here is India. Trump says if he wins again, he will slap more taxes on Indian goods. This is from an interview that he's just given. Let me quote from what he said. The other thing I want to have is a matching tax where if India charges us, India is very big with tariffs. I mean, I saw it with Harley Davidson. I was saying, how do you do in a place like India? Oh, no good, sir. Why? They have 100% and 150% and 200% tariffs. If India is charging us 200% and we are charging them nothing for products, can we charge them 100%? No, sir. That's not free trade. Have you heard this before? Well, we have. Trump has said all of this in the past. As president, he repeatedly complained about India's taxes. We looked through the archives and we found this statement from 2018. Listen to this.
Well, India charges us tremendous tariffs. When we send Harley Davidsons, motorcycles, other things to India, they charge very, very high tariffs.
India and America have an extensive trade partnership. All kinds of products are traded and sold, from almonds to apples, metals like steel and aluminium, pharmaceuticals and weapons and everything in between. Both sides have done military drills. India has bought American oil too, but all Trump can think about are Harleys. Do you know how many of these bikes are sold in India? A few hundred every year. Last year, just 601 bikes were sold. That's all. 601 Harley-Davidson bikes sold in a country of 1.4 billion people in 1 year. 601. It's not even a drop in the ocean. Now, to be fair, the brand has legacy. It's more than 100 years old. Many Americans identify with a Harley bike, but Americans, not Indians. In India, it barely has a presence. Can removing the tax on these bikes fix the trade imbalance? It stands at $28 billion in India's favor. Removing or reducing taxes on a few hundred bikes will not really help. Then why does Trump keep obsessing about it? He does because it makes a good political point. Trump is basically appealing to his core voters. This pitch is designed for regions like the Midwest and the South. They have a large number of Trump supporters, also a large number of Harley-Davidson owners. Often, there is little distinction between these two groups. Many are members of organized groups like this one, Bikers for Trump. On Facebook, they have more than 376,000 followers. They organize riding events, and mobilize support for Trump. Most members of this group own a Harley. Now, this is an important vote bank for Republican leaders. Other candidates are also trying to woo them. In the month of June this year, there was an event in Iowa. Many Republican candidates turned up. Among them was Mike Pence, Trump's former running mate and vice president. Pence took part in the bike parade. Let me show you a picture. That's Mike Pence riding a Cobalt Harley Davidson. Do you know who else was there? Ron DeSantis, Vivek Ramaswamy, even Nikki Haley, the entire roster of Republican presidential hopefuls at a bike rally. They all attended it. Guess who did not? Donald Trump. But he's making statements that will win these votes. Trump is leading the Republican primaries as of today. If the present trend continues, he is guaranteed the nomination. The only challenge at this point seems to be legal. He faces a series of court cases. Some of the charges could lead to a jail term. So the former president is leaving nothing to chance, but trashing India over Harley-Davidson's is bad strategy, really. The company closed its India operations in 2020. That's the year when Donald Trump was defeated in the election. Harley-Davidson does not even manufacture in India anymore. It has licensed the production to an Indian manufacturer. In the US, the bike is losing customers. So Trump may be betting on a shrinking voter base. Instead of complaining about India's tax regime, perhaps he should work on his legal strategy to remain in the race. And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story, starting with space. Do you know how astronauts eat in zero gravity? An Emirati astronaut has released a video. His unusual way of spreading honey on a piece of bread is a must-watch. We will show you how he does it. Meanwhile, do you feel nervous on flights? What is it that makes you nervous? Turbulence? Well, passengers on Southwest Airlines experienced something far worse. They saw the plane's engine catching fire. The flight en route Cancun in Mexico had to make an emergency landing. And a 4-meter whale was found dead on the Peruvian coast. We'll show you drone footage of it. And finally, we're taking you back in history. On this day in 1994, the French troops pulled out of the East African nation of Rwanda. This came after ethnic tension reached its peak. Thousands of Tutsis and many Hutus were murdered. But on August 21st, France's highly controversial mission in Rwanda came to an end. We're leaving you with that. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
Arrête.